I'm back again. Oh, Jesus. Honestly, I'm just going to be really straight up. I mean, my last episode, I kind of gave y'all a little rundown of like how things have been in my world. And now I finally feel like I am coming out on the other side. And I have these episodes that I owe it to the world and to the people that I interviewed to actually release them. And so now I'm finally releasing them. I can't even get away with like pretending that I just did it because I have red hair now. And in these podcast episodes, I have brown. So, now that we're coming back and we're starting to just get back into the swing of things, I feel like the last couple weeks I've been really trying to understand exactly how it is I want to continue to show up in these spaces, especially now that I don't know, I just feel I'm in this new era and chapter in my life in the best way, in like the healthiest way, I would honestly say. But it's just taken me a minute to adjust to like all the newness that's been happening. But now I'm like feeling like I'm ready to get back out there. I'm ready to start doing things again. And so I recorded these next three episodes. So this episode that you're watching now, and then the next 2 weeks. I recorded these episodes back in like June. Yeah. Like end of June, maybe beginning of July. And gosh, what a different time in my life that was. But these episodes were so good. And these beautiful women that I had on this podcast, I was like, I need to release these. So I know it's been months, but I had to release these anyway. And so I'm really, really excited to like kind of like go back in time a little bit and just experience the wisdom of all of these women that you'll have coming to you these next few weeks. With, of course, me with my red hair in the beginning of each one, because that's just like what we're doing now. But lo and behold, this week's episode is actually really, really incredible. It's with a dear friend of mine, Lena, and she really is just such an incredible, wise, like sage is like the best way I can put her. Like she is just so warm and welcoming, and her knowledge from just all of her experience in evolutionary astrology, sociology, psychology. Like she has this beautiful, super unique blend that brings her work from, yes, working on the individual level, but even into institutions. And like, it's just some of the most incredible it's just incredible work that really no one else is doing out there. It makes her so unique. And so I'm really excited for us to dive into this episode. A little bit about Lena before we begin. Lena Papadopoulos is a leadership educator, coach, and consultant. She supports heart-led, purpose-driven leaders, change makers, and organizations who are committed to creating revolutionary change for individual and collective liberation. I mean, look at the material. Her approach is a unique blend of her background in sociology, psychology, cultural anthropology, intercultural education, leadership development, life coaching, and evolutionary astrology. This episode's really cool because she reads my chart in from her unique lens in evolutionary astrology because it actually is viewed and the chart is read so differently compared to how I look at the charts from like Placidius Western astrology. So it really is such a unique episode where we're kind of like bouncing back and forth and talking about astrology and how like this work can really help change, of course, you as a person and like really lead you into like all this really deep shadow work that again, like normally when people are like, what's your sun, moon, and rising? You're not necessarily like thinking, oh, I'm gonna like look at my astrology for like the shadow aspect of it all. But let me tell you, it's like so, so cool. So without further ado, here is my beautiful friend, Lena. Hello, Lena. Welcome to the show. I'm so unbelievably excited. I can't even form words. That's how excited I am. I feel like, and I don't know why, because again, like I met you last September, but I feel like I have also known you for a long time. We've been able to just get so close, and I'm so excited to have you on and just share all of your beautiful, insane Scorpio magic. And so please tell everyone who you are, what you're all about. I can't wait for everyone to just fall in love with you as I have.
Oh, I love you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Oh my gosh, what to say about myself? I'm in a big period of transition right now with my work, but um, the Scorpio themes have always been a significant part of what I've done. They're definitely coming along with me for the transition. Um, so yeah, I have like a background, in leadership development, intercultural education, and then I kind of left that realm and dove really, really deep into spiritual personal development work. And that's really where I started, when I guess I started to embrace all my Scorpio ness, and especially like in that time frame, like learning myself astrology and seeing, as you know, like how many placements I have there, um, and just feeling really validated kind of around the themes that have been so present in my life and the things I've always been interested in and the ways that I approach everything that I do. Um, and yeah, like my work is kind of coming full circle now, bringing all the things together. And I'm developing a leadership methodology to really look at the intersections between individual suppression and collective oppression, and how the shadow is manifesting in self and society and systems, and how we are like living projections of the shadow projecting onto the collective, how we're also internalizing the shadows of the collective. Anyways, there's a lot there, but yeah, this is probably not very clear, but there's a lot of a lot of changes, very Scorpio like happening over here, so
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I think that's what I admire about you the most is your ability to shift and change and evolve. And like honestly, like I know you are going through a change, but I honestly don't even think you did the work that you're doing justice. And so like I want you to talk about how you got into evolutionary astrology, how you're like bridging that and like bringing that to the collective, especially in leadership and everything. Like tell us, because especially for me on my end, Western astrology and looking at the chart, we actually view it very differently. But because I think you start with Pluto, right? And like you really start with Pluto as like the main, which I find to be so interesting. Um
Mhm.
so and for you with again, so for those for those that don't know you, as I'm like as I'm going in, Lena is a Scorpio sun, Aquarius moon, Aries rising, which now really like diving in with you makes so much sense. Um, but it for me, it's your all of your eighth house placements. You have one, two, three, four planets in your eighth house, some in a Scorpio and some in Sagittarius. And Sagittarius rules over astrology and higher learning and knowledge. And so I feel like the two of them combined too, like all of the Scorpio, like Scorpio already naturally is the truth seeker, right? Like they're just here to find the truth. And then also Sagittarius is here to also know the ultimate truth. And so
Mhm.
I feel like you looking at astrology in this really unique way, I feel like is so Scorpio, and especially starting with Pluto, obviously.
Mhm.
It makes a lot of sense. So tell us more about like what this is, what this approach is, and how you are bringing it into leaderships and humanitarian social justice. Like you do incredible work. So like we love the intro and we know that you're changing all the time. So you might not know exactly what to say, but I'm going to just mirror to you that we that we can still talk about how incredible our work is while we're going through shifts. So by all means, I'm going to give you take us away.
Mhm. Yeah, so well, yeah, I'm obsessed. Yeah, as a Scorpio, obsessed with evolutionary astrology. I love the approach. And it's really looking at the soul's evolutionary development across the course of lifetimes. And so we really look at Pluto to understand what cycle of development the soul is in. So we kind of like move through these different cycles, where there's an underlying kind of concern of the soul of like, this is really informing the purpose of our incarnation and the lessons that we came to learn, and especially the things we came to break free of. And so that's an area of intense transformation as signaled by Pluto throughout our lived experience. And so the idea with evolutionary astrology is really like that the soul's purpose, is to kind of navigate these certain lessons and challenges throughout one's incarnation. And Pluto is really giving us insight into what is driving everything that we're doing. And it's the most unconscious part of who we are. Um, and so, what I really love about looking at the chart in this way is that it actually brings to light so many of our shadows, because it really is showing us what our unconscious beliefs and patterns are and how we're um, kind of moving through the world in these like these past life echoes. And so we're kind of limited in some sense. It's almost like our soul orchestrates this experience of limitation and stuckness and restriction, because it's like we're pushing ourselves to break free of those things and to move in a different direction. And I love using this in leadership and leadership development because it allows us to see really how we're holding ourselves back, and usually because of things that we're doing to self-protect. And these are patterns that have been developed over the course of the lifetimes, so they're really deeply ingrained. And the things that we are struggling with, that we're learning to navigate, they happen to be the things that we are the best at supporting other people with, but they're also the things we have the most stories around, the most feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt and insecurity. um the it's really like having this, yeah, just like map, right, to our gifts. And I love using it because I combine the chart with a process of shadow work, because it just works so well, so naturally, so easily to use the things that come through in a reading to inform then like a process of shadow work. And so it's really breaking through the unconscious beliefs and patterns so people can embody their light. Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, it's just so interesting to think about, especially when we think of Pluto, they don't even consider Pluto a planet anymore. And I'm like, y'all are like the worst. Like, I remember I was walking through Target and like I was looking at this little like solar system, like drawing like Pluto wasn't on it. And I'm like, the disrespect that y'all are giving this man, this man. But like that's how but that's how I feel. I'm like, poor Pluto. Because it's truly, I find it to be so interesting, right? It's our farthest planet. And
Mm.
like when we think about that and we think about the unconscious, it's like this planet that might seem so far away. We now don't even want to look at him anymore. We don't want to include him with the rest of the planets. But like how much of our unconscious we don't even realize that we don't, and Pluto's ruling over the unconscious. And of course, you being the Scorpio queen that you are, is so naturally fits to guide people through this unconscious work. Because I think, and I love that you said with so many people, they think soul purpose
Mm.
is like their career or
Right.
like what they're doing for a living and all of this. And I'm like, I was having this conversation with another friend of mine. Well, you guys will hear it. It's on it's on the pod, it's gonna be on a podcast with Alexa. um, but I was talking to her about how soul purpose isn't something that you do. It's your
Mhm.
entire lifestyle. Like it's all of and all these little pieces of who we are, who we love, and what we do for a living, and where we live, and all these things. Like they all go into the cauldron that
Mhm.
it's the sole purpose, but like it's it's not just one thing. And I love that you use Pluto as kind of this indicator of like, hey, on an unconscious level, this is kind of where we're coming at when it comes to like really achieving our purpose. And these are the things that actually are hindering us. So tell me a little bit more about the process that you move through. You can use me as an example also if you if you feel so called to like kind of bring you through this process of like really understanding Pluto. Because I think especially when it comes to Western astrology, like I'll be the first to admit, like I'm not looking at Pluto very
Yeah.
often. When I first I'm looking at your nodes, I'm looking at Chiron, I'm looking at your Saturn, like you're obviously like your sun, moon, rising, all of that.
Mhm.
More of the inner planets, and of course some of the outer planets too, but I wouldn't say I have like the biggest focus on Pluto. So I would love to like understand your process of how you bring your clients through this like reclamation of their
Mhm.
shadow and their
Yeah.
who they are.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many layers to this, but the way that I really begin is yeah, to look at the Pluto placement, particularly by house, because Pluto is a generational planet. And so a lot of people born around the time that you were born are going to have the same sign. So it's really the house placement that is the best indication of the cycle that the soul is in. Um, and I use whole signs, by the way, so it's a little bit different.
Oh, totally. Oh my God. Okay, that's so interesting. Okay. For those that don't
Um,
know, there's different house systems that you can use in astrology. Um, I never know like what one is. I mean, I use Placidius.
mhm.
Like I said, I even how you say it.
Awesome.
Placidus. I'm like, is that even how you say it? I'm like, that's just the one that I use.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so what makes is evolutionary astrology all based on the whole house system?
I'm sure there are people who are, using different houses. I think kind of just depends on what works for you. But it's what I learned when I first started studying, so I just kind of stuck with it. I never really explored the other house systems, but
Well,
um,
it
yeah,
kind of they do kind of shift, which I find to be so interesting. So
yeah,
I'm so excited. Okay, lay
yeah,
out.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay. So I begin by looking at the Pluto placement, particularly by house. Then we look at the south node to inform kind of how that energy has played out in past life experiences. And then we look at the ruler of the south node to elaborate on that story. So, using you as an example, your Pluto placement, at least in my thing, is in the 10th house. And, that's like a very, that's the archetype of Capricorn. And in evolutionary astrology, this really connects to um, issues of judgment primarily. So, I mean, there's so many layers to this, and I don't know if I want to like compartmentalize because there's a lot that I do want to share with you. But um, basically, your soul is in this cycle or in this process of wanting to really break free of judgment and societal judgment and the need to fit in and the need to be successful in really traditional terms or by definitions of success. And so, um, yeah, there are a lot of there's so many different layers here, but it's like what the soul ultimately, right? Then we're looking at the Pluto polarity point. So what's the opposite of that? The fourth house in Taurus. Um, the soul is ultimately moving toward kind of moving away from this need to be successful in the public eye and really to come to an internal definition of success. And there's a lot of, I don't know, there's just like a lot of other stuff happening in the chart, which signifies that this issue of like authority is really important in your soul's journey. And this desire to like break free of strict restrictive authority that's been imposed from the outside, to really return to this sense of inner authority and inner knowing, and like, I don't need to mold and shape who I am to fit in to society. Like, I can just be the truth of who I am. And when we look at like the South Node placement and its ruler, it's kind of like how you were trying to move toward that in past life experiences is really through sharing your ideas, and just wanting to be like this creative, self-expressed individual. This is where like a lot of your Leo energy is coming from, right? Because you have your South Node is in Gemini, but it, at least in my chart, it's also in the fifth house. And then that is ruled by your Mercury in Leo in the seventh house. And so, in this kind of attempt to break free of judgment, you're really like trying to be a self-expressed individual, and you wanted to shine, and you wanted to just be authentically you, right? Like Leo is all about like the courage to be self-expressed. And what happened in these kind of past life patterns that you're now here to break free of is that there became actually there was like a lot of attachment to kind of the validation and praise that was received from the outside because of your creative self-expression. So it was kind of like feeding into still that underlying issue of really caring about what other people think and how society judges you and perceives you. And so now you're really learning to break free of that completely, like to be wonderfully Leo and self-expressed and, putting yourself out there, but without any kind of attachment to the outside and how people are perceiving you, and really to live from that place of inner authority. And because of some things happening in the chart there, my sense is that there's like a lot of kind of inner child possibly wounding around this, and inner child healing that needs to happen around this, around authority and potential rejection of authority. Because what I see very often, especially with something you have in your chart that we call a skip step, it's like this, you started in a past life to kind of make momentum towards your soul's purpose in one particular area, and then it was kind of like cut short by an experience that you had. Obviously, in a full reading, I would be going into a lot more detail, but I'm giving you like the broad overviews here.
No, no, this is incredible.
Um, but this, like, even this skip step, and there's also like a past life trauma signature connected to this too. It's like this like this distortion of power that came through someone's authority. And so what I see happening a lot when people have these kind of signatures is that through their very conscious rejection of external authority that's kind of imposed on them, what happens is they very often kind of unconsciously or subconsciously reject their own authority, because authority has been twisted, distorted, warped. It's been used to control, to manipulate. That's been their experience of authority. And so there's a part of themselves that's like, that's not me. But what happens in the rejection of that is also just a rejection of like your own inner knowing. And so, right, like that's what I was laughing with you about, like before we even started recording, and a conversation we had yesterday is because you were telling me, right, like, well, why can't it just be enough to trust your inner authority? And I was like, oh, it's so funny that Megan is saying this to me. And of course she would, because I know that like this is such a big theme in your chart.
Oh my God.
And yeah, I mean, there's so much I could say, but let me pause because I've talked a lot. So,
Okay, well, just again, I'm just in awe. I love astrology so much. And it's again, like anyone can make fun of it, can make fun of astrology all they want, and I just find them to be dumb. Like, because I just don't understand. And like maybe that's like so mean of me to say, but I don't care. Because I'm like, because you can't tell me that like you look like you literally just looked at my chart and you literally just said probably one of the most common like things that I feel like I have struggled with through my life is the authority piece, is the external validation, which is so interesting because in my North Node in Sagittarius, in my other house system, I can't fucking remember its name. But it's in my 10th house.
oh,
Career and like that public image. And so like it's just so interesting. You just put into words like something that I feel like I have been like actively like trying to move through. It's like feeling like, I want to be this like big person, but then it's like I don't want it to be aligned with anyone else's rules or expectations, and like learning how to like feel, especially as a projector, success is my like alignment theme, like
mm-hmm.
feeling successful. And so like realizing that like through this like a few placements in my chart that it's like, oh, like the biggest lesson that I'm learning, I feel like in this lifetime is learning how to feel successful and feel satisfied on my own accord through my
Yeah,
own authority. And like, oh my God, the amount of times through my life where I have looked at authority and I've been like, oh, like, okay, like I guess this is just like how life is supposed to be. And then like completely rebelling and then having no authority at all. And then like kind of like the havoc that happens when you don't have authority in yourself. And that's why I've fallen in love with astrology and human design because it gives you, and why I love then sharing it with other people, because it really gives you that sense, which is so funny that when we were talking about this yesterday, and I was like, girl, like you need to use your authority and like let that authority be enough. Because that's, I feel like one of the biggest things I go through in my own life that I have to keep reminding my own self is like my own authority. And like, can I let my authority be enough? Can I let just how I show up and like like letting go of the perception of other people and what they think about me. I mean, I used to even hold a lot of shame around being the astrology girl, and like everyone, just rolls their eyes at me and they're like, "Oh, Megan going off about astrology again, like how basic of her." And like, all of that. And like now finally I feel like we mirror each other in a lot of ways because you're going through all these shifts and changes. I feel like I've also been going through all these shifts and changes, really coming back around and like really owning this side of me again and like owning all the knowledge and just being able to share this with other people. So I just find this all to be so, so interesting.
yeah. So I have I have to add some things, because as you were talking, they were like, oh yeah, this is relevant to all these other things in the chart. But it's like part of what is supporting your process of transformation and moving toward your soul's intention is to burn things down. Okay. And this is something you and I have talked about so much. And it's this constant process of like changing it all up. And part of this is about detaching from what people outside think, because as you and I have talked about before, right, there is this certain element of like almost like guilt or embarrassment or shame that comes with the constant change and like, oh, I'm rebranding again and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And it's like, part of this process of burning it all down and starting over is supporting the detachment from what other people think.
Mhm.
And it is going to be, I mean, it's just going to be a part of like what you do. And it is specifically connected to your work and your career, especially. Um, and the thing is, for you though, that when the burning down happens, it really needs to come from like an internal motivator, an internal inner knowing, and not because, oh, I feel like other people don't get it, or I feel like I'm not getting, the kind of like validation or attention that would help me feel like this is the right thing. Like it just can't be an externally motivated transformation. It needs to be coming from within, but it's also like it's part of your process. So it's like, don't feel shame about that, Megan, because you're like here to do.
Oh, what a fucking relief.
um,
Oh
yeah,
my God.
yeah,
That's
and then I
so
just also
funny.
wanted, yeah, and I also wanted to say that like so some of these past life echoes that are coming through in this life is like, yes, like your career and your work and being successful in the public eye was very much a part of these past life experiences. And part of what you're learning now in this process is to really create time and space to nurture yourself, to rest, to take things slow, to be cozy in your home environment. And there's a lot of like returning to the feminine energy, which I was like, oh, this just makes like a lot of sense for things
Uh,
that you have done. And I think even, I don't know so much about human design, but I think even you being a projector is almost like the soul's orchestration of like, you need to slow down and to take time to just like rest. And I feel like that's intentional because there is something in you that like wants that big fame and success, but also it's part of your soul's intention and purpose to just kind of like step back from that. And not that you can't have that, but it's there has to be a balance. It's really important.
totally. I'm feeling it's like it has to be in my own way in my own time. You know,
Yeah.
like it needs to be like again, like that slower, like it's not because when I also think of Capricorn too, right? Like, big go energy, like they're here to like really be the fucking CEO and like go, 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 go. And like maybe if I was a generator, things things would be different. But I think just like you said, like me being a projector, it is a more and it's not even like a slower way of life, but I think it's finding success differently and like really breaking down like the old paradigm of like needing to hustle and
Yeah.
like needing the awards and the recognition and the acclimates in order to feel successful, right? Like really learning how to define my own version of success and like what success actually means to me on the inside and
Mhm.
like changing how that looks. And I can't tell you, I literally cannot tell you how relieving. I'm like looking at my vision board. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to like burn this down. I'm like, all right, like, oh, this needs to change. Because I feel like throughout my life, like, I mean, that's kind of what I've been doing. I've just been like, and like it can get embarrassing after what it feels like the umpteenth time of burning shit down, but I love that you said it's like I'm not burning it down for everyone else, like it really comes from this inner knowing. And I truly believe that in my own calling, like I live this way to help show people that they can also burn their life down and like be okay. I was talking to a friend yesterday actually, and we were talking about, like as we get older and like, even some of our parents, like they feel like, it's like, oh, well, I'm in my 60s, so like, it's too late or like, I already fucked up. So like, and you kind of just get into like this moment of settling and then you just to try to just like ride it out. And I'm like, I would rather set myself on fire than
Mhm.
get to the point of feeling like, well, I guess this is it. I guess this is just what life has dealt me. And I feel like that's why I've committed my whole life to like helping people see how
Mhm.
spectacular and amazing and incredible they are.
Yeah.
And like how they don't need to settle and really let yourself be expressed, even if it's through mistakes and through burning it all down. Because I also acquire that to my line three in human, which you have as well.
Mhm.
Your line three in human design, along with then my own life path five. Like, it's truly within us. Like that
Mhm.
three line, you are
Mhm.
truly, I know it can feel like we're throwing shit at the wall and just seeing what sticks, but it's truly a part of the process.
Right.
And I think, I know, and maybe you can speak to this too from your own lens, but I know for my partner, it's been really helpful for him to like know this about how I operate. Because for me, it's like, even if he can see that he's like, Megan, you shouldn't do this, blah, 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 blah. Like, until I do it and until I get my hands on it and I'm feeling in it, especially you also have emotional authority. When
Mhm.
we actually then start to feel it and like feel what it's like and really understand what it means in our lifestyle, how it feels waking up every day and doing it, it really then we can understand what actually it is that we want and that we don't want.
Mhm.
We have to let ourselves go there. And I think that can be very hard for people, right? To like be willing to like go for something or do something that we don't know is going to give us the results that we want to get, right?
Yeah.
For me,
Mhm.
holding on, you mentioned expectations. And I know for me, holding on to expectations is like, is something I actively am working on all the time because
Mhm.
my expectations are always, it also, it ruled my expectations rule my emotional wave too.
Mhm.
Into later, different things
Mhm.
ruling emotional wave. So when my
Mhm.
expectations aren't met, I plummet,
Mhm.
which like, which is I again soul's orchestration. It's really funny that from your perspective in this life I'm learning how to drop the expectations and the external expectations,
Mhm.
and learning how to do that will actually make my emotional wave actually a
Mhm.
lot easier to navigate,
Yeah.
move through.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And then you mentioned, I want to help other people, so I just want to say this too because this is something that's different in the way we're looking at charts. Like because for me, your south node and north node, like your south node is in the fifth house, your north node is in the 11th house. That's different than what you have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so according to my, my way here, it's like you're channeling these Leo-like gifts into serving the collective, right? And even I mean, like the things that you do, like you help other people see how amazing they are, how talented they are, the bright light that they can shine, right? Like that's yeah, you're bringing that Leo energy into serving other people and serving the collective, and that's part of what you're here to do. And then it's in Sagittarius, so like you're teaching people how to shine like a Leo.
Ah, my Leo heart is so happy. But okay, so now, like, to take you, to take us along through your process, like,
Yeah.
now I know all this information, right? Like, you just shared with me some of my deepest, darkest, like, wounding, right? That I
Mhm.
experienced throughout my life. Like, now how do you take your clients, like, through to the other? Like, how do you begin to master this energy and, like, embody this energy?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, then I share like what are the kinds of things, right, that would be supportive of you, like moving in the direction of your soul's evolutionary intention. And obviously, if it was like a longer container with somebody and not just a reading, it's like we would really work on cultivating those things or like creating a sense of felt safety around moving in that direction, because again, like so much of what makes it hard for us to move in the direction of our soul's intention is that we have like these past life patterns that feel comfortable and familiar. And so a lot of the ways we move through the world are really self-protective, um, and moving toward, you know, the opposite kind of energy or direction is often really uncomfortable, and it can trigger feelings of unsafety that are even connected to past life traumas. Um, so, I shared with you a little bit already around, like, for you, what are some of the things that would support you to move in this direction? One element is like, yeah, it's like it's detaching from outside expectations, societal sort of norms. It's going within, and really spending, like, it's important for you to spend time on your own, in your own energy. Because, right, you also have, um, there's some past life trauma signatures for you that are connected to, for me, they're placed in the 12th house. And so there can be, like, really a lot of, kind of absorption of other people's energy, other people's stuff. It's important for you to have, like, this Cancer, like the opposite of Capricorn, this cozy, comfortable home, this sanctuary that you can retreat to, and that you spend time in your own energy, that you take pauses, that you rest, right? That you're not, like, all about the hustle and the grind, that you are also really focusing on pleasure, because that the Pluto polarity point is in Taurus. And so that's all about leaning into pleasure and what feels good, and eating food that makes you feel good, and wearing things that make you feel good, and being out in nature is really important, because, again, you're, like, coming kind of from these past experiences of being really, like, yeah, maybe, like, very driven by success, maybe being in a corporate world, maybe, just being in positions of influence and power. And so it's like, well, what is more grounding? So to do things that feel grounding. I mean, I see a lot of, like, international travel here, so I'm just saying you should probably, like, come to Mexico, but that would be supportive of
Yeah.
you. Um, and also, like, really, especially, I mentioned it before, but there is, like, inner child healing that needs to happen around authority. And I don't know if, I mean, based on what I see, obviously, how it plays out in a lived experience always can vary. Um, but my assumption would be that your dad was really strict with you, or that he was very authoritative. Is that true or no?
I have, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. I wouldn't say he was strict,
Mhm.
but growing up, there was just, like, a lot of anger.
Mhm.
Um, and my mom was also very strict.
Mhm.
My mom, I would say, is now, like, probably on the more, like, strict and, like, disciplined side compared to my dad. But at the same time, like, it was just a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was a very interesting dynamic that's,
Mhm.
like, continued to change. I think, like,
Mhm.
as then, like, life continued to move
Mhm.
forward. So I guess with your clients, like, because this is all very, like, specific. So, like, you're really taking them through, like, using these placements and these signifiers, it sounds like, as, like, taking these lessons and then seeing how they're related in their current life right now, and how this wounding is actually what needs to, like, really be healed in order to then continue to move forward on your path and, like, soul intention
Yeah. Mhm.
aspect, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Gosh, this is so interesting. This is so, so, so interesting. And so how does this work? Because I really want to lean on your I really, really want to lean on your moon, right? That Aquarius moon in the 11th house for me. In the 11th,
Mhm.
which is all about
It's in
like,
my 11th house too.
okay, great. Which is all about community and
Yeah.
like this collective, right? Because I feel like that's what you really bring this work into is like the collective shift. And um your Jupiter is also here as well in Aquarius in the 11th house. So like really for you it's like finding all of this like prosperity and abundance and this feeling of home and safety in this collective purpose, like bringing
Mhm.
this information to help the individual in order to serve the collective. And
Right.
so I really like, how do you bring this work into these types of spaces and like really open themselves up, I feel like, to this like very like deep inner work that I feel like you bring people through.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, oh my gosh, there's so many layers about this, like how it has been part of my own lived experience and a lot of like, I think I've just been denying like the needs of my moon for a very long time. And I even think that that's what's pushing me to make this kind of shift or transition in my work because it's like, no, I know that I need to be in spaces that feel community centered, community driven, and like one on one kind of coaching is just like not the thing. But I want to bring, the depth of the type of work that I do into these spaces. And um, I know that I'm really here to support people who are revolutionaries, right? Like who have Aquarian energy and want to do work that creates change in the collective. And so those are the people that I want to support using this type of work um to really empower them to make the changes that they want to see happen in the collective. And a lot of that comes with like embracing being misunderstood and being the outcast, the weirdo, the black sheep, the one who wants to or the one who is different, because I think that's actually what we need to create a different kind of world, right? I think the people who are the most like weird and out there, Aquarian, like they're actually going to be the ones who change. But they're also people who feel very insecure because of having, you know, experienced being odd, strange, misfit, outcast. So yeah, it's like really, I want to support people who are here to make waves in the collective. And I do want to work more with groups. I mean, that's really like where I shine, is really facilitating group processes and really creating spaces of vulnerability and honesty and like going deep. I'm really good at doing that in a group space. So, yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, now when I'm looking at your chart and I'm looking at all of this, it's like I'm so happy that you are coming to that conclusion, right? Because there is
Mhm.
so much, like your chart is just very collective focus,
Yeah.
which is so interesting, right? Even like, because yes, we have a lot of eighth house placements, but three of those are actually in Sagittarius too, which is really all around like, again, that truth seeker, that knowledge gatherer, like really just helping people learn and really, especially with your Saturn being here as well on 0 degrees Sagittarius in your eighth house, like such a critical degree. I find it to be so incredible. Like that's really what you yourself are also here to learn. Like you are really here to learn how to embrace the topics that maybe not in a corporate setting everyone
Mhm.
wants to talk about, but really learning that like there is so much knowledge and wisdom and power that is meant to really not only be talked about, because again, your Mercury is here as well. It's like
Mhm.
literally my dress is falling off. Like all this eighth house
That
placement.
Scorpio power,
I
yeah.
know.
Coming
It
in
was addressing me.
like
Truly, like it's something that not only you're meant to really speak on and talk about, but you're really meant to embody. Like that's what your soul really came here to learn is like not only to truly be yourself, and also all of these placements, your sun and your egoic desires, literally only again a few degrees away from your Saturn. Like your Saturn return was probably a trip. I can only imagine just because it hit Saturn really hit all of these signs. So really having these life lessons around again, your like your sun, like what you desire, like what you're actually craving in your life, how you speak, and also your yeah, Uranus too, which is all again around that collective, the eccentric, right? Like the like the black sheep. But what I find I
Mhm.
think to be the most interesting is that though we have this strong desire to bring this knowledge that you are very empowered in, right? Like it's truly with your son here, like it's truly like what you embody. And so it's very easy for you to, again, lean on your story. Like I really believe that you should also talk more about your personal story and your personal journey because I know from being your friend that that's a big part of why you got into all of this in the first place. And I think the more that you lean on your story and your life experience, because that's what's really ricocheted you into this whole journey to begin with, it will also help you begin to understand how to embody and help others relate to your work when it comes to even speaking about your work and teaching about your work. It helps them really relate again as a collective. But your Chiron is actually in Gemini, in your
Mhm.
second house of material possessions, money, all of that, which I find to be really interesting because we have this desire, right? The Aquarius to be with the collective, right? And like helping groups and all of this. But when we have our Chiron also sitting in Gemini, who's also communication, learning, groups, right? Also very much like the intellect, there
Mhm.
can be a lot of that resistance of like, okay, well, like, I am eccentric. I am this black sheep. And there might be a part of you that still feels like we can't truly let people in on a deeper level, right? There's a part of us that doesn't want to open up, especially when it comes to, you know, with groups and charging, making money, like all of that, right, is really sitting in that second house of like really starting to understand like how can this work be valuable in a group when we know it's valuable, but like really learning like that we can actually embrace this part of us that actually is so embodied in our work, but now going even deeper into your own story and your own human experience. I think the more
Mhm.
that you bring that into your work and like mesh it into your whole story, right? Like it will really help people understand and also heal this part of you that might have been cast aside for feel like for being the black sheep that maybe was especially Gemini rules like friends too. Like I feel like it can just be like friendships, especially like it's giving like small town, small time vibes, or even like again Gemini also rules over social media, so like not wanting to like feeling really wounded and scared to though the Sagittarius and you and all these Sagittarius placements has this deep yearning for knowledge and teaching when it comes to actually communicating that and like using your voice and putting yourself out there, there can be this the underlying fear of rejection, even though
Yeah.
like at the end of the day, like I mean, literally pretty much your entire chart is on like
Mhm.
that top
Mhm.
side of the chart, which is so like outer world, like forward thinking, like just truly some of the most incredible placements for what you do.
Mhm.
Like it's fun to know that when we look at these charts, it's like you are so on purpose. And it's like now just learning, how to really embody this energy and like bring all of you to the table as you move through all of your transitions that you'll move through.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's become so clear to me like in the last few years that I I I really am a teacher. Like I am supposed to be teaching and speaking about, yeah, my ideas and this way I have of seeing the world. And like, I've had like a podcast on my list for literal years that I have been resisting and procrastinating. And there really is this wounding around my communication. And I think a lot of it comes from, it's almost like I've internalized the way my dad communicates and thinking that I probably sound like him. And it's just like, I don't want to. So I have all these stories that I tell myself around like nobody really understands what you're saying, or you're just repeating the same thing in different ways, or you're just like you're not articulate, you're not blah blah blah, like all these things. And the feedback that I get from other people is always the exact opposite. Like, wow, you articulate things in such a clear way, like you break down really big ideas and concepts into such digestible like pieces. You are so articulate, you are, whatever. Like people are like, "Oh, you should start a podcast. I would love to listen to your voice." It's like people always say these things to me, right? But it's like I have this, yeah, there's just like this wounding around all of that. So, mhm.
So interesting. It's so interesting because one, of course, like how normal is that to like again, and I think it's also so Sagittarius too. Like I feel like Sagittarius, because their thirst for knowledge is so deep, like they can get so passionate and you can get so in the weeds, like you just like love to learn all of the things.
Mhm.
And then of course also with your yeah, you're a 3-5. So, you have that 5 profile line as well of
Mhm.
like being the change maker and like the rebel and someone that just genuinely says no to
Mhm.
things that maybe other people like wouldn't even think to question, right? And so of
Mhm.
course there can then when we go to communicate these things, though we're learning all of them, there can be a little bit of that wounding of like, oh my God, what if no one understands me? Like all of this, all of that. And I think what I find to be especially interesting in your astrology chart too, like your North Node is in Taurus in the first house. So in Taurus, the sign of beauty and pleasure, right? You even just talked about that with me in my Taurus placement, but also in your first house of identity, of who you are. And I feel like, especially with all of the deep dark work that you love to do,
Mhm.
right? Starting to actually begin looking at this work instead of with the mindset of, and from I think the lens is like, this is really deep work. It's not for everybody. Like,
Mhm.
a lot of people don't love to talk about this, but starting to find the beauty in the shadow work, right? Like, 'cause you are like, you're the shadow work queen, right? So, like, finding the beauty in the shadow work and really like starting to encompass the pleasure, the growth, the abundance that
Mhm.
comes from eating your core wounds for breakfast, right?
Mhm.
And like really understanding that, like, you can. I feel like the more that you start to find pleasure and beauty and think of just like Venetian energy, right? Just like absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, pleasure building energy through the shadow work. It then I feel like will help you talk about the work that you do in a way that actually feels good for
Mhm.
right? Because then it's not just because at the end of the day, and you know this, but I think it's hard for to be communicated sometimes that like shadow work is necessary to experience the beauty of life. That's why we do it, right? It's the whole point of healing is to
Mhm.
like feel these things so we can actually learn to enjoy our lives, right? And I think the more you lay on that, especially, oh my God. there's literally a huge squirrel literally outside, like pawing at the door. Okay. I'm gonna take it as a sign. Um, like Earth Mother is with us.
Well, I thought you were gonna say a Scorpio, but that would have been really wild.
Oh my God, that would have been insane. I know. Also, like, totally possible. I do
Yeah.
live in the desert. But I think the more truly, like, the more that you lean on this aspect of like, and really embodying like the transformation that comes from being, that Scorpio queen, that comes from the shadow work, that comes from, oh my God, like, what is happening? Well, not in front of me. That comes from being like the queen of darkness, right? The really embodying, honestly, now that I'm like really embodying like Persephone energy, like
Mhm.
and leaning on that, right? Like leaning on the queen of the underworld and like the maiden of spring. And it was like how beautiful, low key, now that I'm even looking at your chart, like with that North Node Taurus placement, like oh my God, it's like, it's just so beautifully perfect. And I think the
Mhm.
more that you lean on that in your own life and really, and you can start small, right? Talking about growing up, talking about how you got into this work, talking about your friend, right? Like talking about the areas in life that like you had to move through to have the life that you have now, which is like living in Mexico with your partner, like branching out, starting a business, and now going back to your roots and like reclaiming these places that like need this work, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Cool, right?
Yeah. Mm.
How are you feeling?
Yeah, I feel good. I'm just so happy to like be here with you.
It's so
Hmm.
interesting. I want to go over um your right angle cross of I'm like I can't even speak today. Rishi, when you're watching this, you're gonna have to cut this part out. You're gonna have to cut this part out. But truly, I feel like, especially now within the work that you're doing, of course, like in, really embodying both of these spaces and really learning how to communicate too, right? Like leaning, I really want you to, especially since your Mercury and um your Saturn, like all of these major aspects of your chart are also kind of lying in your South Node. I think it'd be
Mhm.
really beautiful as you continue to lean on your South Node to also find ways to bring in that Taurus energy and start
Mhm.
really like leading with that and looping that in. And I think the more that you do that in the way that you communicate about the work, the way that you communicate about your own journey, I really feel like that will start to bring the whole picture together.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. It has been a challenge to lean into the Taurian energy, but I've definitely gotten better at it as I've gotten older, as we do. But yeah. Hmm. I
It's
know it's important.
and it's also especially in a chart like yours, like where your sun, your egoic desires are on the opposite, they're on the opposite end of your North Node. So naturally, like it is that is a harder energy to move through, right? When it feels so completely opposite to like the deep unconscious like work that we are so comfortable being in, right?
Hmm.
And then knowing that like oh there gets to be a part of me that is also like from this work gets to be abundant and beautiful and like really showing like the full expression of this. um
Hmm.
and I think the more that you learn how to work with it and even in like your personal like bring even more like Taurus energy into like what you're wearing and like the I don't know, when I think of Taurus, I think of like perfume. I feel like every Taurus smells like so good. Like indulging in like little luxuries
Yeah.
that maybe like the queen of the underworld might
Mhm.
not like have in her life, having more flowers in your home, like really like witnessing yourself as like the true like divine embodiment of both of
Yeah.
these.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, girl. Yeah, and for me, my north node is in my second house, so it's kind of like double the, um, yeah, a double whammy there. And with evolutionary astrology, with my all the things, both my south node and my Pluto being in the eighth house, and my north node and Pluto polarity point being in the second, it's like I'm also really like I'm supposed to be using my Scorpio gifts to make my money and to create financial stability and security for myself. But it's like I have to lean into pleasure and abundance and joy and like things that feel very foreign to me, coming from this like dark, you know, dark past life experiences. So yeah, it's definitely a huge part of my lesson in this lifetime.
Absolutely. And that's why, like, the more that you even lean into your authority in human design, like, really leaning on your emotional authority, I think is probably going to be the biggest thing that you can take away. Like, as you, yeah,
Mhm.
learn to come to terms with, like, having this dark past life, like, really, like, so comfortable in, like, the death and rebirth deconstruction of it
Mhm.
all. And, like,
Mhm.
learning to embrace, like, the pleasures and joy and light that life brings really really one I think the two biggest things is like feeding your moon sign, so like feeding that Aquarius moon, like really nourishing your moon in that ninth house, so like finding your people, finding community, like really like tending to your inner world and like creating that safety as you begin to incorporate like the more Taurusian, like what am I even saying? But you get it,
Yeah, yeah.
energies. But then also as an emotional generator, you know, really leaning into the feeling behind it all. So how do you
Yeah.
manifest? And you're a specific manifester as well. So meaning that yes, I'm like meaning that when it comes to manifesting, for you, it's all in the details. It is
Mhm.
really like knowing very specifically what you want
Mhm.
and truly allowing yourself to take the action to go for it. As a generator, you know you can do the work. And when you're in it, you are so passionate and you are able to continuously have that life force energy to pour into what you need to pour into. But I think it's realizing using that emotional authority, right, to start to differentiate what we're pouring into that isn't
Yeah.
actually reaching our goals and what we're pouring into based off of like because we feel like we have to or because people expect us to or because like this is what I've always done and like this is what feels comfortable compared to like knowing what to pour into that's actually going to get you to where you need to go and like
Mhm.
your emotional authority, especially as you continue to feel your way through life and learning how to like truly embrace your feelings too, like as a compass and as a guidepost for you as you continue to like harness both of these forces, I think is going to be like the biggest shift that you can take. And like it will really help embrace some of these newer qualities and newer life experiences that we're not necessarily used to experiencing, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's been such a huge lesson and challenge for me too, is to really honor, like to honor the gut feelings, to honor the like my desire to say no, to not do things that don't light me up as a generator, because I have such a tendency, to just do things out of a feeling of obligation or guilt or something, even when the gut's like, no, because I don't have like a rational or logical reason for why the answer is no. So then I intellectualize and I talk myself out of the feeling. And then I agree to the thing that then doesn't light me up, drains me, doesn't feed into my joy, into my pleasure, you know. So I've really, yeah, I mean, I think I've really been learning how to just like, yeah, no, you're gonna suffer if you don't listen to yourself, you know, and then also like loop other people into that, because then I'm making commitments that I'm showing up to half-heartedly or that I have resentment about or whatever, and it's like, yeah, but I resent myself for denying what I already knew, right? My inner authority. So, yeah, girl. It's been a big challenge for me, but I know it's so important.
It's a process of deconditioning, right? And I
Yeah.
feel like that's a lot of your work too, is like this process of deconditioning around like what we thought we needed to do in order to get us where we thought we wanted to go, and realizing that we actually are meant to operate so much differently. And it's funny that you mentioned the word sufferings. It just like stood out to me because it's like, yeah, girl, you're going to suffer. And it's like, well, the Scorpio queen, the queen on the road, suffering is like another day.
Mhm.
It's just another
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it comes so naturally, which is another reason why I feel like is like why it can sometimes feel so easy to be like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll just do this, because like it can feel so second nature, and realizing
Right.
that like we actually don't need to we don't suffering doesn't need to be the homeostasis, right? Like it doesn't actually need to be the home basis. And like, for you with that North Node in Taurus, like I feel like that's another big indicator of like you are really actually meant to truly enjoy all of the fruits of life, right? And like really enjoy all of what life has to offer, and like learning how to invest your generator life force energy in a way that
Right.
actually serves you instead of serving everyone else. Because again, you are so about the collective. So, like, it's very easy for you to want to help others. And again, with a generator aura, you are naturally so open and welcoming, and people want your help.
Mhm.
And like learning how to again be that authority and like actually advocate for yourself,
Yeah.
is going to be huge.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh, I love this. Do you have
Yeah.
questions for me or anything?
I don't think so. I don't think so, Megan. Do you have
Well, I
questions?
think the last thing I just want everyone to know, like, because for me, like in the 10 minutes that I feel like we like unpacked my chart, it was like deeply profound. And so I would love for my audience to know, like, how can they work with you? How can they find you? Like, how can they connect with you? All of the things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've given you some links that you'll share in the show notes, and that's probably like the best place to go because, you know, I'm making a transition. I'm not going to be using my Instagram anymore. These particular offerings won't be visible on my website, so just to go to the links directly, but there's the option to do just like a 90-minute soul purpose astrology reading. And
Mhm.
then there's the option to do shadow and soul, which is using the reading as a foundation for 6 weeks of shadow work, where we really just like break through all the unconscious beliefs and patterns. Yeah, that's a really transformative program. So,
Yay! Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your wisdom and all of your magic. I had a blast, and I can't wait for everyone to find you and love on you as much as I've loved on you. These last few months, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on. This was so
yeah,
amazing.
thank you. I had so much fun. So, so fun.
All right, everyone, we'll talk soon. Bye.